Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the Brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants.
Welcome back. This is Rick Moore, past master, Fort Worth 148.
This is Billy Hamilton, senior warden for Fort Worth 148.
This is Gabriel Yagish, junior warden.
This is Evie Kirkendall, master of ceremonies for Fort Worth 148.
Well, it's good to have the whole team back for episode 2, season 4. Woo-hoo. That's bonkers, huh?
So yeah, season 4. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine that we've been getting away with this for 4 years? Wow. Or that we're starting our 4th year of getting away with it.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Ain't been shut down yet.
Still rolling. So, this week we're going to discuss Grand Lodge. What went on down at Grand Lodge. So, before
How many of us actually remember it?
And you know, it's not that we didn't partake a little bit, but everything happened so fast, it is a blur. It's hard to recall specific events, because it just bam, 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 bam. Get up at 5, go to bed at 2.
Tell you what, the electronic clickers have really contributed to that in a very positive sort of way. Now these votes are getting jammed out super fast, and it's wonderful.
Oh yeah, we went through 14 or 15 resolutions in one day.
Yeah, so we made it to number 14 on Friday. Yeah, I mean, where we came in Saturday and it was nothing. Easy peasy.
It was pretty nice.
Yep. So before we get started on that, though, I did want to ask, because I saw it on Facebook where they posted about it, why do you guys feel like the Fraternal Relations Committee report comes after the elections? I mean, of all committee reports, why that one?
Well, at this point, it's got to be kind of tradition, we could say, hey, there was actually a bill to say, hey, we've got to take care of all the reports and all the business before doing elections. So we could do something like that. Or we could push back the time of the elections to make more time for business. But the reality is that we're stuck in this 10 a.m. constraint for elections just because that's the way we got to do it, apparently.
Well,
so we suffer for it because we don't get to hear the Fraternal Relations Committee report until afterward.
Yeah.
So I have a bit of a different take on it. In a way, my question is, why is it such a big deal that we have it after elections? Because I hate to say it, I felt kind of bad because as soon as the elections were done, people just got up and left. Yeah. And it's a little bit of a disheartening display to see so many people, as soon as the gavel drops and elections are done, they're like, oh, I don't care about the rest. In a way, I mean, I feel like if you've already made the effort to be there, why not be there for all of it? Fraternal relations, I don't know why it's done at the end, but does it matter? If it's tradition, so be it. And if not, I guess the question is, why aren't you hanging around to hear that part of it as well?
It's true.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say that I find that, I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but, the resolution that was proposed that would change the order of that and make all business have to be done beforehand, I was in favor of it, not because I think that necessarily it's going to affect the elections or anything. I thought it was a good idea simply because it would encourage people to stay longer. because if everybody's leaving after the election, push the election later in the day till the afternoon, so that it encourages more people to stay and find out who their grand officers are going to be, and to vote those people who can vote. It allows them to vote on those grand line officers, and they get to hear all the business and all that stuff. So I think it dovetails very nicely into this topic, that I think that all the reports and things should be done before elections, just to encourage people to stay longer and be more part of the business of Grand Lodge.
And just to play devil's advocate, because when it comes to, like, say something you think it's as simple as, let's not vote for new officers at 10, let's do it at noon or 11 right before lunch or something. Well, they have pictures to take, they have this to get ready for, and this, that they need that time, to where 10 o'clock is basically the latest you can do it and be ready for all that other stuff you have to do. And, you know, when it comes to the same token with, you know, yeah, they should stay, but you got to think, they've all been sitting there just like we have that long. Most of them are a lot older than us, and sitting in those uncomfortable chairs, elbow to booty hole, is not conducive for an old man's health. So as soon as the major business is done, it's not that they want to leave. It's almost to the point to where a lot of guys have to. And granted, that's probably not everybody, but there's a lot of factors in there to where, you know, I was just reading about Netflix, to where people usually only watch about the first 15 minutes of the stand-ups that are coming out. So the comedians have caught on and started doing their main act right up front in their specials on Netflix. Because that's what the audience, you're not going to change the audience. That's what they do. Same factor here. I mean, because we hear committee reports from entities that aren't even governed by the Grand Lodge of Texas. I don't know if y'all catch that, but sometimes they say, I move that this committee report be spread upon the minutes of the Grand Lodge of Texas. So you have no way of changing or voting or telling them what to do. And if any, you know, those are the ones that maybe should come afterwards, because you're going to be able to read it anyway. But the fraternal relations, you're voting on stuff that's kind of important. And it also caused so much contention. Yeah. You know, because when something major does pass like that, then everybody's like, oh, you just waited till we left. And while it reeks of that, that's not the case.
It's that people are electing to leave when all of that is going on.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if you show up to Grand Lodge, you should show up to all of it, you know, and you have too many guys that are like, you know, I've heard all sorts of things, you know. Some of it's very important, right? Like, hey, like, I have a child's birthday party to go to, and I feel like that is a very valid reason to leave Grand Lodge early. Don't get me wrong. But I've also heard people leaving Grand Lodge early so that they could go golf, right? You know, that's also a thing. But the reality is that proper conduct for participation in Grand Lodge, especially when you have voting rights, is to stay for all of it, including the reports that come after elections. But this whole thing with the Fraternal Relations Committee report and what happened last year and what happened the year before repeatedly proves to me this very cynical take that I have, that Masons cannot be trusted to behave well when it comes to organizational leadership. You can't trust them. So the answer here should be to not give Masons the option, because given the option, they will choose to behave poorly rather than to participate in the functions that our Grand Lodge needs them to participate in.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's willfully acting poorly. I think it's just maybe a lack of forethought of, oh, well, if I get up right after the election, I'm not going to be able to hear the fraternal relations. I'm not going to be able to vote on the other grand bodies, you know, throughout the world that we recognize, you know. And it is important, right? Because we had, you know, one vote where we chose to recognize, you know, one body, and then we voted against recognizing another. So I'm not sure if it's willful. I mean, it may be an unintended consequence of hurrying to get out as soon as possible after you find out who's going to be your new, grand junior warden.
I think I would definitely classify that as willful. I mean, you got what you came for, and that's it. You're only there to participate for just that one thing. I think that's very willful.
Well, and the other thing that I think that sometimes gets missed in all this, and granted, this was my first time to ever go to Grand Lodge in the years that I've been a Freemason, and the one thing that struck me is how much unimportant stuff is front loaded, and how long it takes to get to the stuff that really matters.
Yeah.
And so by the time we actually get to the stuff that really matters, people are already antsy in the pantsy, ready to run out the door at the first opportunity to get out of the stuff that really isn't important. And I think that that is part of the problem. If the business was front loaded, and all of the optional stuff that is duly part of pomp and circumstance and everything that is traditional, and that's great and wonderful, but the business needs to come first, and it needs to be there while the voting members are there, while they're the most attentive, not after some of the events that come in the evenings when people come, may or may not come back in the mornings for a session or come in late for a session. I mean, it's just, that was the biggest frustration for me, is how long it took to get to the business that we were all there to do.
I think that's that.
And so it's no wonder that people leave early.
That's the major point, because I see most guys as, Saturday morning about 8:30, their hips already hurting them, and they're thinking about a 3 to 4 hour drive home, and they're like, oh my gosh, as soon as this junior warden's voted on, I got to get out of here. I got to get something to eat so I can take my medicine, and I need to get home. It's not like, I don't think most guys are going, I'm just here to vote on the grand junior warden and I'm out. There's a mix of it all. But the fact is that's not going to change ever. It's been that way since time immemorial.
Well, the other side of that too is the reason why the election is actually scheduled is because some people aren't able to make the first part, and so it's known well in advance. Here's the time when the election's going to be. So if you can only make one part, here's the part that most people, are really there for. So that way, if you can only drive up on a Saturday, when you have to be there by.
Yeah. And did you guys see folks getting up and leaving after the Grand Junior Warden vote, and we still hadn't voted on the Grand Secretary? It was like, wait.
I would argue that the vote for Grand Secretary was more important.
Of course. It's hard to say more, but at least it's equal. It's a trustee vote. It was like, no, where are you going?
Right.
There was a big difference in the number of people that I've heard in the past. Like I said, this is my first time, but in the past, I've heard people talk about how that there's just a mass exodus after the Grand Junior Warden vote. And while I noticed some people getting up and heading for the doors after the Grand Junior Warden vote, after the Grand Secretary was elected, that was when like half of the audience got up and left.
Oh, more than half, yeah.
No, it turns into a total ghost town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me and Gabe were sitting there with the crickets. It's like, what? But, that is what it is. And I don't think that will ever change. It's a long weekend, whatever you want to put in there. Should we stay? Absolutely. Until our business is done. Maybe not for installation. If you're, if you're going to pick a time to leave, maybe there. But that fraternal relations report is a big one. And seems like we could flip that around. It just seems so weird. That's the one report we wait on. I don't know. So the other question I had, what did you guys think about attendance? Do you have any estimation on attendees of Grand Lodge?
Didn't they actually read out the credentials at one point?
So you do read out their credentials, but that counts past masters, so you know there was like 1,700 voting past masters there. And then there were 500 lodges represented, 500 and change. So then you got 500 Worshipful Master, Wardener, Proxy. Some of those could be the same.
2 more people per lodge or something.
Well, you got to think, I mean, how many non-voting members did we take? There's a lot of Master Masons that go. Probably close to that.
Well, but in all fairness, too, how many of those past masters are now either the proxy vote or the sitting worshipful master with lodge vote? So
exactly.
There's like a lot of overlap there.
Yeah. But I don't know the total amount that stadium holds. I've heard it's like 5,500 or something. I don't know, so don't quote me on that. But I think we had...
It was almost full.
Yeah, it's the most I've ever seen in the 12 years I'll be going, which isn't long, but that's the most I've ever seen. My dad was there when they voted the home and school, and he said there was no empty seat in the place.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But we were close there.
Y'all want to go through and tag this one by one?
Yep. So, I guess before we get started, just real quick, did you guys have anything that you were more excited about this week? I mean, I know Grand Secretary tops it all. But as far as resolution-wise, was there anything that kind of flew your skirt up?
There was nothing in particularly that I found like super wild. There were some that I had some strong opinions on, but we'll get to those when we come to them. But nothing that I went, oh, this is a total game changer.
Yeah, it's pretty boring this year, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I felt about it too. That there was a little bit of intrigue with some of the resolutions that I just found, mildly interesting. Or I don't know. There was one that I kind of had relatively strong feelings, like Gabe talked about, but nothing that I was like glued to my seat waiting for it to come up or anything.
Yeah, same here. It was like, oh.
Actually, no. I have I guess it would be strong feelings about one that I wanted to make sure failed.
Well, yeah. I mean, but even going into that, we knew it was because it failed last year. But we'll get to that. So the first two that came up, those were pretty straightforward because we had the 2018 holdover that talked about a 10-cent fee that went into a retirement fund that was no longer active or no longer used. And so that 10 cents now goes to the general fund. And since it was a constitutional change, it had to be done 2 years. It was like one of those no-brainer things. So
right. And that, now, being a constitutional change, it also requires 2/3 vote, right?
I think the first year it does.
Yes.
And then the next year it's a majority. Don't quote me, but I'm pretty for sure. But it would have passed either way because it was an overwhelming majority. And then the first resolution that came up was a redistrict. And those are no-brainers. I almost wish it was left to those districts to vote on only. But whatever. Because that's like, of course, if you want to redistrict, go have at it. But we really didn't get anything.
It'd be interesting to see because it was from District 36 is what our notes say, and it would be interesting to hear what some of those lodges had to say. I believe that there was a comment on the floor about how someone, I think that was either the committee member presenting or the person who submitted the resolution had talked to all of the lodges involved or something like that. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah,
that they put into the minutes that they all agreed with the redistrict.
Yeah, because it was total unity on it. There was no dissension on it whatsoever, and of course it passed. So now there's 6 lodges in 32, 34, and District 36.
Yeah.
So they're even Steven now.
I think if every lodge in the district agrees to the change by a 2/3 vote or whatever, the Grand Master should have the ability to just say, cool, you're a new district.
Yeah.
Now, He shouldn't have the ability to just change a district. If all of the lodges that would be affected consent, then he should have the ability to just say, ta-da.
Yeah. He should have the ability to bless it, not institute it.
Yeah, he's just the guy that puts the stamp.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So then we get to resolution number 2, which is, that was the first fun one. That was the right to protest a brother after his definite suspension is up. So not an NPD brother, but a brother who was suspended.
This was a contentious one.
Yeah. This one, it got a little bit heated. And it all came down to, because for me, I don't know that it's a bad idea to be able to reinvestigate a brother that went suspended or expelled that's getting reinstated. What if it's been 6 years? What's he done? Who's been in contact with him? But anyways, the deal killer on this one was that one protest equaled 3 blackballs. So it's like one voter equaled 3 votes. And I think that was its ultimate demise.
So there was that. There was the undemocratic, because, we believe one man, one vote, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of a given. Like, we take it for granted in America. One man, one vote.
Yeah.
So that was part of the problem. But also there, that when the jurisprudence-oriented arguments that or stated, hey, listen, like, if the guy gets sentenced to a 2-year suspension or a 6-month suspension, right, that is what the lodge decided, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is the democratic process. It is what we consider fair trial, right?
Yeah.
And then to go back and say, oh, you know what? Well, we're going to have a vote and you didn't pass the vote, so you're going to stay suspended for, however long. What that does is it undoes the legitimacy of the trial in the first place, because what you're going back is you're saying, well, no, the punishment as decided by the lodge at the trial was not correct. So you're undoing the entire legitimacy of the trial to begin with. So
well, and you're also
not fair
adding
to
in
him,
this,
and it's not fair to him, and it's saying that your lodge was wrong in the first place.
well, it's also saying that it also creates the situation where you can create a punishment in perpetuity. Because ostensibly, if they get suspended, they come back, the lodge has said, you're going to go for 6 months. You come back, somebody throws one black ball. It essentially continues the suspension at the next vote. It can be done again, and it can be done again, and it can be done again. So it just makes this this punishment in perpetuity situation. And I'm sure that the brothers and the people who submitted this resolution, that wasn't their intent. But my big question was, if someone is really that heinous in your lodge, where that is an issue where you need to consider it, like the suspension wasn't enough, why couldn't you get 2 other brothers along with you to vote against this person's reinstatement?
Yeah, well, technically,
why would you need 1 vote to eliminate this person? And that was the thing that I kept coming back to. Why? That makes it sound like that one person, if this person is so bad, you should easily be able to get more than 1 person, but at least 3 people to vote against somebody's reinstatement.
Oh, and again, this is one of those examples where a lodge is trying to solve its lodge problems, or where an individual is trying to solve their individual problems by trying to enact statewide legislation. You see this all the time.
Yeah, it does happen quite a bit. Things that should have been handled at the local level are brought up before Grand Lodge.
So
this seems very local. I can't imagine something like this happening in a large lodge. Can you imagine a lodge as big as ours, or some one of the more urban Houston or Austin or San Antonio lodges? That just seems amazing to me that one person in a lodge that big would have that sort of power. It blows my mind.
Well, and even
it very well could have been submitted by a large lodge. I have no idea, but
even in the country lodge, I feel like even in a country lodge, you should still be able to wrangle up 2 other brothers.
Yeah, ultimately that's my
no-brainer.
point. Yeah.
So just to be clear, that you're pointing out the catch-22 of the 3 blackballs, because I can't come up to you and tell you how to vote. There's even the interpretation that me coming up to you and telling you something that's going to create the fact you're going to vote, in a certain way is not legal. You can talk to the investigation committee that can change their report, but that's the catch-22 of the 3 blackballs. You can't go around and tell everybody, hey, this guy does so-and-so, you're essentially campaigning against his membership. And that's really
and I'm not suggesting that that when I say go around and round up 2 brothers, I really don't mean like in a campaign method. Yeah. I mean more like if somebody is really bad enough that they needed to be suspended and they are not heeding the wise counsel, if we can call it that at this point, of a suspension, then there's got to be more than one person that notices that bad behavior. And if it's really that bad. No, and so it's not so much about wrangling up. It's just that there's got to be more than one person who notices how bad that behavior is and would throw an additional 2 black balls.
And, the thing that really stood out to me is that if a guy gets suspended, and let's say he was justly suspended and he got a good sentence of 3 months, and, this other brother's still talking to him and hanging out with him, and he took it the wrong way, and he's ready for revenge. As soon as he gets back in lodge, he is going to just he keeps talking about all the disruption he's going to create. What can a lodge do? Would it not justify, if that's what he's professing he's going to do, that we might want to be able to investigate him and not let him back in? And I get it. That's an extreme scenario. Because, you guys are right, too, that it would probably be abused. Because somebody in lodge could still have a grudge. It's like, as soon as he petitions, I'm blackballing him. It's a danged if you do, danged if you don't. But that failed, so no worries. It stays the way it is. Mm-hmm. So number 3, resolution 3 passed, and that was another slam dunk. Tommy Chapman had the Honesty and Integrity program his year as Grand Master, and now it's an official Grand Lodge award. So pick you out a junior high school student and recognize them with the Honesty and Integrity. You just call up Grand Lodge and order it. I'm sure there'll be a price with it, but it won't be bad.
And it's another thing that the lodge can do that, encourages kids. I love our ability. We have many ways of doing this, but to have an actual formal program where we can grab a kid and say, guys, among your peers, this kid is your role model. That's very empowering.
Mm-hmm. No, to me, that was a no-brainer. I would hope a lodge would feel free to do something like this, even if it's not a Grand Lodge program, because anybody can make a certificate nowadays and come up with your own name for something and recognize anybody you want. It's just a great idea. So now that's official, and I'm sure it'll be part of Vanguard before long. Moving right along, resolution number 4, it failed. And that was the one we were talking about earlier, alluding to, that all reports except the jurisprudence report had to be done before elections. And I'm trying to think of a jurisprudence report. Is it that bad that we want it? It's like, why not have them all before elections?
Yeah, that one's pretty important.
Yeah. So, but it failed. And that was weird. I guess everybody likes that. The fraternal relations at the end. Then we got into number 5, which was about concerning endowed membership fees, increasing those fees, which was brought up last year. So it took 2/3 vote to bring it back to the floor, and it didn't get that 2/3 vote. So,
which is that just as a side note, I have no strong feelings one way or another about this, but I know plenty of brothers that I've talked to who do have really strong opinions about endowment structures being really not beneficial for lodges. And I'm just surprised with the number of people who have expressed concern about the endowment structure and how inexpensive some lodges have it, and how it ends up being a financial strain on a lodge more so than a benefit to the lodge. I'm surprised that this didn't get re-looked at with the 2/3 vote. I was a little surprised by that, with the heat and the fire out there about endowments.
The problem is so that we have a lot of lodges with a very strong independent streak who are like, don't tell me what to do. And I mean, I could kind of understand, when it comes to dues, I don't think, I believe that a lot of lodges need to restructure how they do dues and endowments, and they need to make sure that it's done in a way that will be a positive asset and allow for growth in the lodge's finances. And a lot of them don't. They fall short of that. But at the same time, I think making it a mandatory Grand Lodge dictate that you must do this, I think that's where a lot of people kind of rebel against it. Yeah. And they're like, don't tell me what to do with my money. I'll figure it out on my own.
Well, and while I totally see your point in that, and I can understand that, the problem is the incentive.
Yeah.
This is operated at the Grand Lodge level. The Grand Lodge sends out the monies from the endowment fund, and so they should have a voice in it, and it should be effective all across. But the other thing that I find really interesting about that independence argument is that lodges have an incentive every member who's voting on that in the lodge has an incentive to keep it as low as possible. Because if the endowment is low, then that means that they have to pay less to get an endowment, which means that they then are looking at it like, well, if I'm an endowed member, I don't have to pay dues anymore.
Yeah.
So the financial incentive is there to keep it as low as possible. And so by having a voting body like the Grand Lodge of Texas say, we need to increase it so that these struggling lodges who are heavy with endowed members and are barely making enough money to pay the bills, if that in some cases, we need to increase the endowment so that we don't have this financial problem going forward. Yeah, so while I appreciate independence, in this case, I think that the overriding interest is in the financial stability of all the lodges that have these heavily endowed. And everybody, I don't think any lodge isn't seeing endowments as somewhat of a problem.
Yeah. And everybody knows that it's a problem. Like, this is something that you can talk about, right? Where, like, I genuinely believe that if you explain to people how an endowment works, like, let's say you walk into a lodge where legitimately nobody understands what an endowment is or how it works, which that doesn't exist, but whatever. You give them the 60-second explanation of how endowments work. Everybody in the room is going to agree, oh, wow, that's a really bad deal for the lodge. It's a great deal for the individual, but it's a really bad deal for the lodge. And yet somehow, for some reason, everybody wants to fight it anyway. And so there's a certain point where, like I said earlier, you can't trust Masons with their own organizational behavior. Like, there's a certain point where you just have to, you're going to start losing privileges to self-govern because you clearly can't take care of yourself.
Yeah, if they vote those in.
And we see it all the time in any kind of election, right? People, even if it's like on vote or something like that, people will vote against their own self-interest because freedom. And that's what it boils down to.
Yeah, and there is there's a big void of information as well, because the how that program pays out and all that is clear as mud. To where I think if there was a real program put forth, a multi-year program to educate folks on what's best for your lodge, they would raise that. a good portion of lodge would raise it. But
well, and I wonder, just as a kind of as a, I don't know, a trivial thing. I mean that in the sense that it's trivia. That I wonder how many lodges who have maybe had to close their doors, who have been financially strapped, or who've had to consolidate and merge. I wonder how many of them have been financially strapped because of endowments, because they don't have enough dues paying members because of the endowment structure. Because I think if that information came out, because I suspect that that's a relatively large number of lodges in the state who've suffered those problems. I think if people saw that and how many lodges are being literally driven out of existence because of a really, really bad endowment structure, it would make lodges really rethink the endowment program in general.
Yeah.
You want to hear the worst endowment structure I've ever heard of?
Oh, go for it.
So this was not in Texas. I'm trying to remember what state this was in, and I'm blanking on what state it was. But they have like a officer leadership training equivalent that this lodge is brought up at that state's OLT as an example of what never to do. And so the lodge's policy was, if you are an officer, you are exempt from dues. Okay. When you serve as master and you successfully complete your term as master, the lodge buys you an endowment. The progressive line starts at junior steward and ends at master. So what was happening would be that they took the degree fees from guys, and they would put them through degrees and raise them and put the guys in as junior steward. And so you would have guys that were permanently endowed members of the lodge who had never paid even 1 year of dues ever, because they paid their degree fees, they became master masons, and they went straight into the progressive line, were exempted from dues, and then when they left the progressive line, were bought an endowment by the lodge. This lodge went brutally broke, and they are now in this state's officer leadership training are brought up as an example of what not to do. And their Grand Lodge actually passed a law that would prevent that same scenario from ever occurring again. So
you got to be smart.
You want horrifying structures? There's one.
That just proves the point that people at the lodge level are going to look and see what is the best way for me in terms of my financial best interests, not what's in the lodge's best interest.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely.
And so it is incumbent upon the Grand Lodge to first make sure that this program of endowment is transparent. And right now, I mean, Rit, I've heard conversations that you've had with people about endowments, Grand Lodge representatives that don't understand the program, and they can't explain it, and can't explain how the monies are dispersed and what percentages are dispersed. And it's just such a mess that I would expect that, and everybody knows it's a mess. That's the other thing about it. Everybody knows it's a mess, but nobody's willing to vote at Grand Lodge when things like this pop up that can reform the system for the better. Suddenly it doesn't even make it to the floor to vote. So, anywho.
Well, and you know what? I'm thinking about it, and we ourselves actually have kind of fallen victim to this recently.
Oh, absolutely.
When we changed our dues, but we didn't change our endowments, we ended up with everybody and their dog was endowed. We had very few dues paying members, and so we had a shortfall because we had a couple of years where we didn't raise as many new masters as we thought we did, and so we had to pull money from our interest, from our investments. So we ourselves have actually fallen into the same trap.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a sticky trap to get out of for sure. There's no doubt about it, because we've had low dues and endowment fees for so long. That's a tough sticker to pull. But they're chipping away one of these days. So number 6 was one that I was actually probably most excited about. That was that one did pass, Resolution 6, and that repealed the recent change concerning the EAs and fellowcrafts after they passed their year.
I was so happy this one passed.
Yeah, so it reverts back to the way it was, that if they pass their year, they can still sit in lodge and receive instruction. And once they pass proficiency, then they petition for advancement, and there's no fee. So there's no worry if an EA comes up that hadn't been there in 6 years and everybody knows him and likes him, he can come on in and start studying.
Yeah. Now, for anyone that doesn't know, the general context is that 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago,
17, yeah.
Yeah, we passed a law that said that after an entered apprentice or fellowcraft lapses and goes past 1 year since their date of either being initiated or passed, they have to file a petition for advancement in order to receive esoteric instruction or sit in lodge, right? And they have to be, and they had to be investigated? No.
I think that was after they passed 3 years, but maybe after the year. I don't remember.
It was but anyway, they, at the minimum, so you couldn't even, if you wanted to go over the catechism, and he said, hey, can, we go over this and just refresh? Because I want to be, if somebody told you, I just want to make sure that when I can turn in my proficiency the same night that y'all accept my petition for advancement. You couldn't even do that.
Yeah.
Illegal. It was a Masonic offense. So this gets rid of that and allows them to receive instruction and sit in lodge. And then if they want to get off their butts and, do that, then they can continue. And if you lapse for 3 years or more, then you do have to be investigated, because chances are if you've lapsed for 3 years, you haven't been to the lodge in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I really appreciated the arguments that explained how dehumanizing that policy was. So it makes you feel like you're not welcome, and this is a good step towards being able to re-welcome brothers, and we have brothers in our lodge that are affected by this policy's change, and hopefully in this case for the better.
And I get Right Worshipful Kirby's sentiment about, if you've got a guy that comes back up that nobody knows that actually is an EA in your lodge, you don't have to start teaching him instruction immediately. If nobody knows him, go to his house and talk to him like an investigation, and make sure that everything's kosher. Because you can still protest any EA's advancement if this guy's went away and now he's dealing drugs. Go make a visit. Use your best judgment. But this way, it gives us that flexibility again, because that was tough, man. You wouldn't know somebody passed their year, and here you are teaching them, and you've violated Grand Lodge law.
Yeah. No, I mean, and we had, let's say, incidents, multiple incidences where we realized, oh wow, that guy passed his thing yesterday or whatever, where there were multiple cases of somebody missing the date by literally a day or 2 days, and nobody knew, right?
No, it was hard to get used to, for sure.
What are we going to do? Stick expiration stickers on the poor guys?
Exactly. So that one's back the way it was. So Resolution 7, that one failed. That would have required a vote of the Grand Lodge, Grand West, before any new proposed realignment of Masonic districts. So like a statewide redistricting, which came up here. I think that was started Jerry Kirby's year. And this resolution would have prevented any proposals coming to the floor without a vote. So it was kind of weird, and I get it. That was the best they could come up with to stave off because, nobody wants to be redistricted unless they want to be redistricted. And when that went around a few years ago, it created so much chaos. But
So, looking through the Constitution, even old proceedings, I thought it was the Grand Master's prerogative to divide the state into districts and to select district deputy Grand Masters as he saw fit. I thought that was part of the duties of the Grand Master.
I'm
So-
not super up to snuff, but I think he does have the right to redistrict.
Right. So in a way, it seems almost like this is saying, well, you know, hey, I want to kind of step on the duties and responsibilities of the Grand Master because I may not be happy with the outcome.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what you said earlier. Don't try to control me. Because I don't, I'll tell you when I want to be redistricted kind of thing.
Right.
And I get that
Ultimately,
because
it's just selfishness.
well, in a sense, but it's like 64A. You really get to know the lodges. You kind of coagulate. And there are other districts out there that do that. They all participate together, and then they get shuffled up. Not that that's going to change a lot, you know what I mean? But still, it's a loss of control.
Right.
But if the case is made, the proper case is made, then whatever. But that one failed. So you could be realigned. Be ready. Number 8, that one was withdrawn. And that was the one concerning the Masonic Order of the Pilgrim Preceptors. I have no idea what that is. Gabe?
It's a body that exists in England. It's not a particularly old one. I think it was started in the 60s or 70s. But the requirement for the Masonic Order of the Pilgrim Preceptors to be eligible for it, you must be a past master of a Blue Lodge, and you must be a past high priest of a Royal Arch chapter. I think it's got like 2 degrees, something like that. It exists in England primarily and elsewhere in the United States. They were just trying to introduce it into Texas.
And I was surprised it got withdrawn, but
I'm not surprised it was withdrawn. The proposer was running for Grand Secretary, and
that's right.
you never want to propose anything the same year that you're running for something.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. It was the same guy. So I'll bet that comes back in future years. Number 9, that one failed. That was proposed to allow lodges to install officers in an entered apprentice or fellowcraft Mason's Lodge.
So this one didn't really make sense to me because installations can be open ceremonies anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did not need this.
No, it was weird. And, somebody made a good point. The argument could be made that if you're installed in an entered apprentice lodge, then maybe you're only authorized to open up entered apprentice Mason's lodges in the future. But that's a stretch. But either way, it was not necessary.
It's a stretch, but you could make a case for it.
You could,
right?
Yeah.
Because it depends on your Grand Lodge, right? Like, I was reading this morning, actually. This morning, I was reading about. It was an online discussion between Masons from different states, and it was about, hey, why is it so common in the states to open on the master's degree for stated meetings, so on and so forth, right? And somebody was explaining that their Grand Lodge's constitution explicitly states that entered apprentice, here in Texas we say, hey, you're a Mason, but you're not a member of this lodge to entered apprentices and fellowcraft Masons, right? The person whose comment I was reading, they explained that under their grand jurisdiction, entered apprentice Masons are members of their entered apprentice lodge, and Fellowcraft Masons are members of their Fellowcraft Masons lodge, and those two lodges operate under the auspices of a Master Masons lodge, holds the charter to all three.
Yeah.
So that's not the way it works in Texas, but depending on your jurisdiction and how your jurisdiction legally handles the business being conducted on different degrees, it very may well be that you find a case where suddenly something is true for your entered apprentices, but not true for your Master Masons.
Yeah. And one of the main points that I think really helped kill it is something that a lot of people don't know is that you can't go to refreshment in an entered apprentice or Fellowcraft Masons lodge. You can only do that in a Master's lodge. So if you open in an EA, only EAs, Fellowcraft, and Masters come in. You can't have your wife and kids come in because there's no going to refreshment. So it was a no-brainer. Open a Masters, go to refreshment. But that one was failed. That was an interesting one because it actually had discussion. Most of these are just like proposed and voted. So number 10 was another good one. That was, it did fail. But it would have allowed the Worshipful Master to recite the EA prayer from the floor with his right hand on the head of the candidate.
I'm super bummed that failed.
Yeah,
you and me both.
And just to give context, the EA prayer we're talking about in the degree, not the beginning. Right. Everybody will know the part there. But yeah, that would have been cool.
So, for context, without giving anything away about the ritual of the degree itself, there is a lot of value to the Bible passage that the Entered Apprentice degree is opened on, which describes the anointing of Aaron as the high priest of Israel. And one of the things that they do is they poured a bunch of sacred oil on the crown of his head until it ran down his beard and to the skirts of his garments, right? Mm-hmm. And that was part of anointing somebody a high priest, right? Like, for example, if you are the high priest of a Royal Arch chapter in Texas, you are eligible to join the Order of High Priesthood. And just how we say initiated and entered apprentice, raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason, exalted to the sublime degree of Royal Arch Mason, you are anointed to the order of the High Priesthood of Melchizedek, right? And we start this journey in the Entered Apprentice degree. And there's a part where there's a laying on of hands. And the idea here is that the oil from your hand touching his forehead mirrors the anointment of Aaron as high priest of Israel. So, kind of pushing this idea that Masonry is a non-sectarian priesthood of good men. And so I'm a big believer in the idea that there very well may be an ontological change in a Mason when he becomes a Mason, right? It's not just that you in name have become a Mason, but that every fiber of your being has become a Mason, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of liturgical churches believe when it comes to ordination of the clergy, right? That this person, like their entire existence, is now different than it was before. And maybe they can't explain how, but they are different. And being able to recite that prayer while laying on hands just reinforces that so much more and brings the power to, that moment in a way that is very different. Ritualistically, not a whole lot changes, but the emotions and power and immersion of the degree are greatly enhanced by that.
So I could go either way with this, right? And so, I understand what you're saying. Well, I personally think that transformation actually occurs in the master's degree. I think I mean, because he even says it, right, in the catechism, really, the EA is more like a confirmation, right? Of, oh, you're this type of person, and so we're confirming that you have the same values that we do. I don't think that's necessarily the transformative moment. Like I said, that comes later in the master's degree.
Yes.
But for this, I see the reasoning behind it, and I personally prefer actually doing the prayer from the east, because all the other prayers are also done from the east, and it kind of makes sense that the voice from the east would be, I mean, you're giving the light from the Bible. So I kind of like that. You're still doing the anointing in that part, so the anointing still happens. But if someone told me, oh, you got to do this from the floor now, I'd be like, oh, cool. I'm okay with that too.
Well, I think that's also the important thing to remember about this particular resolution, is that it wasn't saying that you had to do one or the other.
Right.
It was saying that you had the option if your lodge prefers it. Instead of it being dictated by the Committee on Work that it be done from the east, it would give lodges the opportunity, or the master of the lodge who's conferring, the opportunity to do it whichever way they choose, and be completely okay with the Committee on Work. And that's why, regardless of whether you believe, like what Gabe was saying, or you prefer to take your view of it in the continuity of the rituals are just as important, perhaps, as the anointing portion. I think that it should be given. The lodges should be given that option. I mean, if we're gonna make the freedom argument, having more freedom to choose what is best for the context of your lodge is to me a no-brainer. It doesn't change continuity across the state where the prayer is given, as long as it's either
as long as it's given
or here. As long as it's given, and the Committee on Work says it's either done here or here at the lodge's discretion. And if they really wanted to get picky, they could say, you know what, if you're in a graded degree, it needs to be done from position X. But in any other case, you get a choice.
Well,
so I was gonna say, I wanted to tag in here and say, to kind of go with the idea of confirmation, right? In confirmation as well as in ordination, one of the things that happens is that the laying on of hands is always accompanied by a prayer, right? Like, you don't lay on hands and then not pray, right? Laying on of hands and prayer go hand in hand. And as it stands, the physical act, in our case, the physical action is not accompanied by prayer. It is just a physical action with words spoken, but not prayer for the person receiving the laying on of hands. So both in confirmation and ordination, you would see laying on of hands and prayer go hand in hand. And minor side note, while I think the analog to confirmation is also perfectly valid, I would say that I do agree that ontological changes occur in the master's degree, but that the entered apprentice, fellowcraft, and master mason's degree more closely mirror the changes that occur for the ordination of a deacon, a priest, and a bishop. But that's a different discussion that will take a long time to explain.
Well, there's also the idea here that in any sort of like you were saying, like ordination, for instance, the whole idea of laying on of hands and in ordinations and ordaining priests, pastors, bishops, whatever, it's all about an apostolic line of succession, whereby if you happen to believe in the Christian faith, that the original apostles laid on of hands, and that any church can trace their apostolic line of succession from the most recent ordained pastor at, let's say, an Episcopal church. They can trace their lineage of apostolic succession all the way back to the apostles, so that they have been ordained through the original apostolic line of their church, all the way back up to Jesus Christ's time. That's the way the line goes. And so the laying on of hands here, while not specifically a Christian act, as we all know, that's not the goal here, But there should be a line of succession whereby a master was laid on of hands by a master before them, was laid on by a master before them, and tracing the Masonic lineage back as far as the Masonic line goes. And so when you break that line of succession, it seems to me that, at least in my opinion, the more authentic thing to do in a ritual, the thing that takes it back to the original intent of the ritual, is the laying on of hands. That is the most authentic. The least authentic thing to do is to say it from the East. That's my argument and why I was very disappointed about this.
Hot take, and I like it. Strong take.
Right, but I mean that's and again, I'm not arguing either for it or against it. I'm
oh no, I wasn't trying to say you were.
But you know, that's also if you say that this is supposed to be some kind of ordination too. I mean, because there could be several different parables that could be taken in this. You know, it could be the transition when you think about it. The EA is you know, a person as they learn, right? So the EA is a child, the fellow craft is an adolescent, and the master mason is the adult, right? And then, you know, so in a way, it's the part of, you know, you do the prayer because, of course, we got to begin everything with prayer. But, you know, the laying on hands maybe just, you know, maybe not as important as taking someone by the hand later on and kind of guiding them on their way, you know, through this education and journey. You know, it could be taken either way, right? I guess it's what you personally choose to believe is happening at this moment, you know, as to which way I guess resonates best with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the first person to admit that a lot of these arguments are coming from a Christological or a Judaism standpoint, because obviously
Judeo-Christian is the term you're looking for.
That's the word I was groping for. It's coming from a Judeo-Christian philosophy here, the esoterics at least. But I mean, that's what the ritual is designed to mirror too. So there is that argument.
Right. On a personal note, though, I love the thought that this is actually an anointing. So I'm 100% there with you. I'm just kind of arguing counterpoint.
Yeah. Well, somebody obviously agreed with you because it got voted down. So
you do a good devil's advocate.
It's compelling. It is compelling.
Yeah. It furthers to me. It furthers Masonry's reputation as an initiatic lineage, where, like, you know, you'll talk to people and be like, yeah, like I'm in possession of, you know, lineage X, Y, and Z through this person, right? So, like, you look at a lot of esoteric initiatic orders, and like they have charts that document, like, oh yeah, like so and so was, you know, given this transmission by so and so, was given this transmission by so and so, and that maybe brings. It's a very much more esoteric framework for Masonry, and not just like esoteric ritual, but like, I don't want to say occultic because that has connotations. But yeah. Anyway,
well, if we mean occultic to mean hidden, in what the word actually means as opposed to what it's come to mean, then I could absolutely agree with you there. But
yes, that's kind of what I mean more.
So the rumor I heard, and this is totally a rumor, there's no way I believe it, but I loved it. It was so cool. Is that we originally did it that way. You know, you'd lay hands and pray on the guy. And then it changed because people started reading it and they needed the light in the east to see what they were reading.
And that was actually said. That was actually stated on stage by one of the authors of that bill.
I would love
read that by that resolution. So
I would love to see the site for it, but it's hard to believe. But it's still fun.
Citation or no, that's part of our official Grand Lodge proceedings. As far as I'm aware, that's the official record now.
So what did we learn from Resolution 10? You don't say the C word.
Change. That is the way we done it.
And
except for the time we did.
Yeah, and to the author's credit, he didn't come out and say it. It was the committee report that said, he came right out and said, this committee doesn't think that the work needs to change, and it was like, oh no.
Well, and that's the funny thing is, like, the moment that they said that, I was just like, all I saw was a bunch of old guys sitting in a room saying, "This is the way we did it in my day," and I was just immediately off put by it.
I was repeatedly disappointed, and I truly mean disappointed, not just in the way the vote went, but I was disappointed in the brethren that argued for uniformity. Because uniformity is not something that makes us special. I'm not saying that we all have to be unique and special and everything like that, but when you are forcing uniformity for the sake of uniformity so that everybody comes out the same, that is a death sentence to any organization.
Well,
and it's just disappointing. And I challenge those people. You go to a Master Mason's degree in 10 different lodges,
you're going to see it 10 different ways.
You're going to see it 12 different ways.
And let's be honest.
Anything that they're not legally required to do, and sometimes even then, it's going to be different, right? People will have different, if we're even within a word perfect degree, people will move differently. They'll inflect differently. They'll have different ways of getting into character.
Yeah.
And then in the stuff that's not legally required, you'll hear, I've lost count of how many different Bible presentations I've heard. They're all very different, People write ring presentations, right? We have no official ring presentation, but there are lodges that do ring presentations. I did an informal ring presentation once, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of differences that happen, whether it's inflection or stage setup or whatever you can find. There is really only uniformity in what we're legally required to do, and even then that's not guaranteed.
The other thing that really irked me too, and it was, I say irked, but I really mean disappointed in the same context that you mentioned, is the people who got up and argued that that it was, when would the master gavel? How would they gavel the lodge down? And
right, because everybody has to be standing up for prayer.
That's not
right?
an argument. That's not,
figure it out.
Walk back over 10 steps, depending on how big your lodge is,
and you
gavel.
That's literally
it's not
where
rocket science.
Yeah, it's literally where you go after that prayer. After the prayer, so they would have to stand up another 15 seconds.
Depending in smaller lodges.
How dare we do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that I will say is that according to Article 127, you got to promulgate the ritual as endorsed by the Grand Lodge of Texas. Now, to promulgate means to teach or spread, right? Now, I'm not endorsing spreading ritual that is not endorsed by the Committee on Work on Grand Lodge of Texas. I want to be very clear that I am not violating Masonic law right now. But I will say that if you are commonly using a deviation from standardized ritual, as long as you are not teaching that as ritual, right, that you're not telling people this is how it's done, you're not in violation of Article 127. But also, I am not a lawyer.
Yeah, I think there's more to that.
So anyway, just throwing that idea out there.
Yeah.
Well, as a little bit of a side note too, I think it's important to also recognize that this resolution was by no means a blowout. I was taking notes about the votes, and this one went down 1,274 to 1,700.
Yeah.
So, in terms of all the votes that were taken, this was by far the closest.
Yeah, it was.
It was the one where there was actually a lot of dissent. There was probably about, by the sounds of it, just a like maybe a quarter of the people were kind of on the fence about it. So
yeah. Yep. And you know, you got a lot of freedom in our degrees already. That one little thing wouldn't hurt, but it failed. So number 11, that one passed, and that was to allow, since our Title V changed to where trials go back to the lodge, if a just trial, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, impartial trial can't be achieved, the Grand Master can move it. So he can either move it to Waco or to a lodge within 100 miles of that lodge. So it just kind of gives them the freedom to make sure that, you know, nobody's getting a unfair shake. So that was an easy peasy one, I think. Hopefully that's one that's not abused and everything goes back to Grand Lodge now.
Yeah. No, I think it's very needed in some cases. You know, obviously you're going to run into, you know, even if it's for non-malicious reasons, right? Like, you're going to run into situations where dang near everybody involved in a situation should morally and ethically recuse themselves from being part of a trial. And it may not be because they're trying to put an unfair trial on somebody. Or it may not be because they have ulterior motives. It may just be that they're close enough to the situation, or they're involved in such a way that, hey, really, I can't be involved in this. And that's perfectly fair to say, right? So we're not saying that everything should have to go to Grand Lodge, but if you're in a lodge and you encounter this, just know that you have the resource to move it to another lodge where you can have impartial parties helping you out. I think this is a wonderful tool.
Well, it also, in the context, was just to help out lodges like out in West Texas, where 100 miles apart from one community to another that might have a Masonic lodge is not uncommon.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, in the bigger cities, you know, if you can't find an impartial group of guys to conduct the tribunal, then, you know, there's a dozen lodges in the town or within driving like 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. Down in West Texas, I mean, you're talking, you know, hundreds of miles between towns, especially if you go out as far west as El Paso and some of those lodges out in that direction.
Yeah.
So this is really, I think, designed to help them out as well.
No doubt. Yeah. So that sucker passed. Number 12, it passed as well, and that was to amend to allow the Odd Fellows to essentially rent lodge rooms. Because it has, in order to use a Masonic lodge room, it has to be an approved body. So, you know, Rainbow Girls or, you know, whatever, you pick your example. The Odd Fellows are now one of those. So if you've got a local chapter, you might have a chance to make a little money.
Yeah, and help out a fellow group of men that need a place to meet.
Yeah, well, or in this case, men and women, because the odd fellows are not bigender. What do you call it?
Yeah, they're co-ed.
Integrated co-ed. Yeah. They are a mixed gender obedience, shall we say?
Yeah.
I thought this was kind of a no-brainer, especially because we have a law in Grand Lodge law that specifically allows. There's a group that's called like the North American Conference of Fraternities or something like that. But basically, like, if you've ever been in a Greek frat, like all the Greek frats are like members of this giant North American conference. And so Grand Lodge of Texas has this policy that says, hey, listen, under certain conditions and everybody agrees, then you can let a frat from the North American Conference or whatever meet in a lodge room, right? Now there's stipulations that you have to meet, but they can. And so I think this is great because if we're allowing fraternal Greek bodies to meet in lodge rooms, then I don't see a reason why we shouldn't be letting, you know, the Odd Fellows move in and meet. I think it'd be great to see this expanded to other fraternal bodies, you know, like Rotary or Lions or Elks or whatever. more freedom to consolidate into the same buildings, and for us to help each other out with, finding a home for different bodies, or, and generating a little bit of income. Always a great idea.
Yeah. So that was that one passed overwhelmingly as well. Number 13, that one was tabled. That was concerning that if you serve as DDGM, you could not be a sitting worshipful master in that district that you're serving in. So that one was amended a few times, and those amendments failed, but ultimately it came down to there was some more T's that need to be crossed and I's dotted, so they tabled it. But I think they kind of suspected it would fail.
I think the best argument I heard against this is that in some districts it's hard to find a district deputy in whatever body it may be, even in the Yorkerite, right? In the Yorkerite Grand Body. Sometimes it's hard to find qualified brothers, unfortunately, in some areas. So, usually in those areas too, there may be some recycling of officers. So if you say, hey, you can't be a sitting worshipful master, now you have dropped the availability of qualified brothers in the area to the point where, it's already taken a hard task of finding a district deputy for an area.
Yeah.
And making it even harder.
No, it would hurt lodges.
The interesting thing about this, and Britt and I talked about this up in the stands while this was going on, because it seems like that the purpose of this resolution was to eliminate conflict of interest from a DDGM and the lodge that they were serving in, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it seems to me that the better amendment, and perhaps to whomever is listening out there who was petitioning this, because I think that conflicts of interest, wherever possible, should be eliminated. If a DDGM has to go in and audit or investigate a lodge, it's really not a good idea to have them investigating or auditing a lodge of which that they are in leadership of. That's just, there's no way that they can be impartial and do the job of the Grand Master that they are sworn to do.
Yeah.
Right. So the better amendment would be, the better resolution would be, in my view, to say that a DDGM is not allowed to audit or investigate a lodge of which he is in leadership of, so that the Grand Master just has to assign a different DDGM to go in and do the audit or investigation of the lodge in that situation. It's a pain in the backside to have to do, but it eliminates the conflict of interest without having to limit the Grand Master's reservoir of worthy brothers to choose from.
Yeah,
right. Well, and that's exactly what guys like there's a position called District Deputy at Large.
Yeah.
Right. And that's specifically what these guys are for. Not specifically this, but in the case where a district deputy cannot perform his functions, whether, family issues or health issues or whatever, or because he has to recuse himself, that's what the DDs at large are for. And yeah, if you're a lodge trustee, you need to recuse yourself. That's in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's the resolution that needs to be written, not something that limits who the Grand Master can tap to do these jobs.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how she turns out next year if they bring it back to the floor. So, tabled for now. Number 14, that one failed. That would add additional questions on the petition concerning employment and references. I'm not exactly for sure what I was asking for, but I think it was basically just more contact information.
It was making sure that the forms agreed that the petition had the same information that the investigation committee report had.
Gotcha. And yeah, that one failed. Then, that one seemed like it should pass, but in the end, if a lodge feels strongly about that, which they should, get it. There, you can add a supplement to your petition and get their Facebook profile. Yeah, I think it's pretty clear how we feel about that at 148. The more info, the better.
Well, and I think that the problem that petition that resolutions like this bring up, and I think that you and I talked about it at Grand Lodge, is that it creates the impression that you can only ask questions that are on the petition, that are on the investigation report.
Yeah.
That I think that the investigation report is not meant to be an exhaustive list of questions that you should get that makes somebody qualified. That it's just the jumping off point.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
and that's why it includes a space for notes, and I always have something written down there.
Yeah.
An interesting thing about this resolution is how close it came to passing.
Yeah.
Because it was 1,015 to 1,560 that voted against it. There are a lot of people out there that think that this was a good idea. I don't happen to be one of them for the reasons I just outlined, but I'm surprised at how close it was because I thought this would be a no-brainer, like slam dunk rejection.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, but I hope the guys that voted for it are out there doing it. I mean, our questionnaire before they even get a petition is up to like 68 questions, so you can have additional questions.
And a DNA test.
Yeah, it's coming close now. So number 15, that one was withdrawn. That would require all suspended or expelled Masons to petition through the Grand Secretary for reinstatement. And as it is now, it essentially has to be anointed by the Grand Secretary anyways. But the process is he petitions his lodge to be reinstated, and then they go through that process to reinstate him and then send it down to Grand Lodge. And they're like, check, okay, everything's good. He's back in. So
I looked at this as like almost a counterpoint to the second resolution because it was weird.
Yeah, it was. It's certainly what. I mean, I'm not a big fan of putting more power in Grand Lodge's hands. We know the story of why this guy was suspended, and if he's served his time, then he's back in, or whatever that case may be. Right. We're going to know how to handle it better than Grand Lodge. We should, anyway.
Absolutely.
Right. So, number 16, that one was withdrawn, and it's the same as Grandmaster's recommendation number 1. So we'll go over that here in a second. But last but not least of the resolutions was number 17 that everybody was so looking forward to, and it didn't even make it to the floor.
Well, I think that the people who submitted it expected it to not come up for the 2/3 majority requirement vote.
I think you're
they
right.
were expecting this to be reintroduced by having it reintroduced to another committee.
Now, somebody told me yesterday, and I mean, they were very sure that this got tabled, and I was like, I don't think so. This didn't pass the 2/3 vote.
It didn't even make it to the floor.
I told them, I said, if that would have got tabled, Brian Dotson would have said something to stop it, like he did last year.
Well, and he did stand up to address it. I will never get tired of Right Worshipful Brother Dodson absolutely stomping on bad resolutions.
Yeah, again, I mean, this is a variant of the same proposal that was made last year.
Yeah.
And it was done by the same person who proposed it last year. It's obvious that the person has issue with some presentation or some presenter that he's heard. And it's something that I think needs to be addressed locally. It doesn't need to be a Grand Lodge issue.
Yeah. Y'all ask me next time we're at Lodge, I'll tell you the story. So yeah, that was the one. It was now, this resolution was the trustees would have to approve all presentations at Lodge, right? Last year's a committee on
luck.
Yeah. So
well, and I think there was a caveat in here though, only if there was a protest. That if there was a protest during an educational presentation, the presenter would have to stop, and then he would have to go to the trustees and approve before he can come back and actually finish the presentation.
Can you imagine?
Oh, that's awesome.
Just imagine.
Well,
and to, all right, devil's advocate here. And so I can understand.
You're wrong.
I've said. Well, it's true. I'm just saying the devil's advocate here, though, that there are a lot of presentations that people put together who've never put together any sort of academically sourced presentation. Right. That they just get this harebrained idea, and they throw a presentation together, and it's not sourced. It has no real like academic merit. It has no real educational merit. It's just one guy's harebrained idea about where something came from or where a word comes from. Oh, this word sounds like that. And it's poorly sourced or not sourced at all. And they're getting up there and saying it in front of a group of people who will likely believe it because they're not going to go out and check, sources or anything like that. So I can understand why someone would want to make sure that a presentation that is going to be for the educational benefit of a lodge is well sourced, that it is academically robust, and that it's something that we can look at and say this was actually educational and not making people more stupid.
Yeah.
The other side of that coin is, though, that there are better ways to do that than through a Grand Lodge law.
Exactly.
And so I see the point, but I just think that it's the wrong venue to address this issue.
Yeah.
So you're saying that we should do more research than that goes into creating the latest dank meme on the internet?
Watch it.
Yeah, I think that's the hot take. I think that's the takeaway from this. If you're going to do a presentation, you should actually, do some research and make sure what you're saying is correct.
Right. Now, and the alternative to this too, right, is if you believe someone is totally off their nut, you have the right to vote with your feet and leave. I mean, I think that's really what it comes down to. Is, again, it should have been handled locally.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be Grand Lodge.
No, I mean, we're charged as a Master Mason to correct the irregularities of our less informed brethren, and that's a perfect example of correcting irregularities. So do your charge.
And it kind of makes me wonder, it really makes me wonder about the context of this, because as you guys mentioned, this guy clearly is pretty fired up about this. Second year in a row that he's introduced essentially the same resolution. It kind of makes me wonder the context of what, because this didn't happen in a vacuum. He didn't just get this harebrained idea to, redefine education at the Grand Lodge level on a whim. There has to be a context to this, and I would really be interested in kind of hearing the perspective of the person who wrote it to find out exactly, kind of what that is. I'm not saying it'll ever happen, but it would be I think it would be an interesting exercise.
Would be, but we'll never see it because that won't ever pass. So that was the last resolution. Grandmaster's recommendation number 1 passed as amended. This was allowed for a new officer to be elected at a called meeting if another officer gets ill. So you've elected officers in what would be your June stated meeting, and in that little time period in between June that you've elected them and the end of July, the last date you can do installation, you can now open a called meeting and re-elect another officer if one becomes ill or moves. Now, this does have to be anointed by the Grand Master himself, but if there's a case for it, he now has the ability to grant you that dispensation. So you don't have to have a pro tem officer all year. You gotta act quick.
But it happens.
Yeah, it does, obviously. But you got to be on the ball. Because that's a small amount of time to pick a new junior, senior, whatever it may be, in that period of time. Secretary, especially secretary.
Yeah.
But you have that right now, so that will go. They're going to do the work for the whole year. They might as well get the credit on their Masonic record. So
speaking of short periods of time, that segues beautifully into the next resolution.
Yes, it does. That was awesome. So Grandmasters 2 passed as amended as well, which allows for the majority of members present to vote for consolidation. So it was amended. At first, it was proposed that they had to have 10 days notification, but it was amended to 20 days. So you have to give the lodge, the whole lodge, every member, 20 days notice that there's going to be a vote for consolidation, and then ever who shows up, the majority of those members can vote to consolidate, not the majority of all lodge members anymore.
Yeah, because it used to be that you might get, you might get every single person at that meeting to vote in favor of consolidating and still be unable to legally carry it out because it wasn't a majority of people that actually belong to the lodge as members.
Yeah. And if you think about that, just getting a majority of your members to show up is an impossibility. And then to make them all vote the same way? No way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For context, folks, the national average of, like, in almost every body and in almost every lodge in every grand jurisdiction, within a couple percentage points, your participation rate of active Masons is going to be a little bit over 10%, and that's it.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Jump up maybe 10, 15%, but that's pretty accurate. And so this was a very smart move in the day and age that a lot of lodges need to consider that, because we're just making electric companies rich by struggling to hold on to a building when we could consolidate with another one and sell it. It's a smart thing to do.
Sell it to the Oddfellows.
There you go.
The only note I have on this is I actually kind of like the original amendment to make it a 30-day notice, simply because I think it would give members a better opportunity to actually be there if they could swing it, with work and home life or whatever. It gave them a longer opportunity to plan to be there. But either way, it's a good change.
I was shocked that 30 days didn't pass. I was shocked. We do everything lays over for 30 days.
Yeah.
I was really surprised by the Grandmaster's, because he got up and obviously suggested this 10 days. And then the committee came out and offered up the amendment that it was 30 days. And then he countered with a second amendment that was 20 days. And to see the confusion on people's faces as we had to vote on an amendment to an amendment, and then that amendment passes, and then we have to vote on the amendment to the recommendation.
Amended amendment.
Yeah.
And then we had to vote on the recommendation, which was just this procedural nightmare that was just confusing to everybody. But the reasoning that the Grandmaster gave for such a short period of time, I just felt like it wasn't necessary. I mean, because if a lodge knows that it needs to consolidate for whatever reason, they've known it for a long time.
Yeah.
This doesn't have to happen at the drop of a hat. Very few lodges are going to be put into a situation where they have to rush a consolidation vote.
Well, and the libertarian in me, it says, you do it when you want, but the gentleman in me says you need to give them 30 days. Even though you can do it in 20 days, give your brothers a month notice. State it at a stated meeting and tell them to spread the word, and then have the letters ready to go out that day. And give them that month's notice. It's just the right thing to do. But if there is a situation where you're in a pinch, you now have the privilege to do it in 20 days, which is more power to the people. So, do your 30 days, though. They deserve it. So our new Grand Lodge officers, which I'm sure everybody knows this, Grand Junior Wardens G. Clay Smith, Grand Secretary Alan Laser was elected. Committee on Work was Kenneth Young. Home and School Board was John Clements. And then there was a home and school vacancy that was filled by Tommy Chapman. He was elected to fill that vacancy. And then the library and museum position, Don Paul Payton was elected to, which was a little bit of a surprise. But that pretty much covers Grand Lodge, except for two things I want to cover just real quick. I know we're getting up there, but I want to talk about the house in the backyard. What are your guys' highlights?
Love it. It was fantastic. Getting to just hang out with people in a casual environment. And so at the house, laid back, casual environment, everybody fellowshipping by eating dinner together, eating lunch together. I love that kind of stuff. Bonding with people over meals, and having discussions in the kitchen. That's become one of my favorite things about that house is everybody gets around that big kitchen island in the middle of the kitchen, and the discussions and sometimes arguments go flying.
Yeah.
And then at the backyard, just seeing all the people that I don't get to see that often. It's great. I love it.
Yeah. Now the Airbnb is, I think it has become my favorite part of Grand Lodge. I mean, the whole experience is awesome, but the Airbnb and getting together with everybody and actually having my son with me there too and being able to partake, in the fellowship was, it's the highlight of my year. I can honestly say that. And then the backyard barbecue, it's always an awesome experience. Congratulations to our brother Robert for proposing on stage at the backyard barbecue and having and being, I guess, accepted. Would that be the proper way to put that? But either way,
getting a yes is what I call it.
Yeah. So congratulations to him and his fiance, and we wish him the best. And I look forward to being back there next year.
Faux show. And congratulations to Robert, too, on his golden trial.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he got that before he asked her to marry him. They snuck that in on him.
I thought the Airbnb was it was the great part. I think was the people who would just kind of come and go. We had us core group that was in sleeping, and that's where our home base was. But then to have people just kind of wandering in, just people from Grand Lodge kind of wandering over and saying, hey, having a good time, shaking some hands, partaking in the discussion, having an adult beverage, that sort of thing. It was a lot of fun to get to know a lot of people in a really laid back environment that just made getting to and from Grand Lodge just that much easier for us that were staying there. So it was amazing.
No, I think a good idea for us next year would be to watch National Treasures or something.
So that movie was legitimately on loop. There was not really any point in time where I walked into the dining room and that movie was not playing.
I saw at one point where Rit was actually fighting with the remote control trying to get it to play National Treasure again.
Yeah, that was a good one though. But yeah, I think we ended up having 14 guys that stayed there. One of them was from El Paso, and one of them was from Granbury, and the rest of us were from 148. And I mean, we had a blast. My side hurt Saturday morning so bad from laughing so hard. It was a good time. I would highly recommend.
And that Cards Against Humanity game was off the chain. I just have to say.
It was epic, yeah.
It was epic.
No.
And the best part was that was actually there at the house. They left it there for us. They knew.
Even
they
better.
They knew what depraved human beings were going to be staying in that house.
Yeah, we got to find us another version for next year because I think we went through the cards 3 times.
So
yeah, they sell expansion packs.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to mention this, but I was thinking as I was there, I have every single expansion for Cards Against Humanity. They were actually given to me by the guys who created it at Gen Con a couple of years ago. Wow. So I have an enormous, you have to break it up into chunks to be able to shuffle the whole damn thing.
We got our next few
we know
years
who's going to be in
planned.
charge of that next year.
Exactly.
Brother Billy, you are in charge of Entertainment Committee.
Oh, yeah. I have, and some of them, I mean, if you think the basic set is bad, some of the ones in the expansion are I feel bad just for reading this card. I'm going to hell.
I love it. I love it. So before we get off, we'd be remiss not to talk about Masonicon 2020 because that tickets have been released. We've made it through the Grand Lodge special and now to the early bird special, so you can get your tickets for $55. It's going to be July 25th this year. Same place, same bat time, same bat channel. But grab your tickets now if you haven't, because they're going to go up again. Not anytime real soon, but it will happen. And
and they have been selling, so that's something that I'm very pleased with, because they're doing pretty well
Yeah.
so far. So
And don't forget about the festive board too, because though we have a finite amount of tickets for those.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
the
that's
festive
already
board,
flying out.
I'm trying to pull up the festive board menu. I don't know where I put it. Hold on 1 second, Rit. You're gonna have to edit this out.
No, I was going to say.
We are stepping it up a little bit this year too, right?
Exactly.
Nice this year. It's really nice. So last year we did the festive board at Joe T. Garcia's, and it was an absolute blast. Very fun. But we got a lot of brethren that asked, hey, normally like festive boards are a little bit more upscale. Dress code for our festive board last year was business casual plus, so you saw guys wearing anywhere from polo and slacks to, full on suits. But enough people had suggestions and input that we take, and we take suggestions and input really seriously, because we want it to be enjoyable for everybody. This year, our festive board is going to be Friday, July 24th at the Riata Restaurant in Fort Worth. For those of you that don't know the Riata Restaurant, it is kind of a fixture of Fort Worth. There are 2 Riata restaurants in Texas. One of them is located in Alpine, and it's a pretty chill place. And then the other one is in downtown Fort Worth, and it is kind of an upscale steakhouse. It's really nice. Dress code is black tie optional. So at minimum, a dark suit that matches a tuxedo, preferably a tuxedo. And get this, I know I'm just kind of geeking out because I got the chance to do the menu this year. Our menu this year is Caesar salad with Asiago cheese and sourdough croutons, with a choice between these 3 options of entree: 14-ounce charbroiled ribeye with cook's butter, grilled mahi-mahi with lobster Florentine sauce, and citrus-crusted chicken breast with rosemary honey mustard. There's 2 dessert choices. One is Dutch oven apple crisp with cajeta, and then the other one is molten chocolate cake with drunken berries. And they're going to have CF Ranch Reserve, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Chardonnay available for, for table wine. So I'm very excited about this. And afterwards, we will all go bar hopping in a responsible fashion.
But we also have a special guest.
We do. And we didn't nail him down until very recently. For those of you who have heard of him, Chuck Dunning Jr. is going to be our festive board speaker. For those of you that don't know, Chuck is highly involved in Guthrie and Fort Worth Scottish Rite. He is a nationally selling Masonic author. He wrote the book Contemplative Masonry, and he is either releasing or just released a book about contemplative masonry for lodge groups, so group contemplative exercises. Chuck's a great guy. He was one of our keynote speakers for the very first Masonicon, and we are absolutely psyched because, I first got to meet him in Fort Worth Scottish Rite, and then we had him on the podcast, and then he was our speaker at Masonicon, and now he's going to come back for round 3 and specifically be our festive board speaker. This is awesome.
So you know what I'm most excited about this festive board about is that we're going to be eating in a room with carpet.
Yes, the sound dampening will be great.
Yeah, we'll be able to hold a conversation. It's going to be top notch. We're taking it up a notch. So I know when guys see that price tag, they're kind of like, oh, wait a minute. But it's going to be worth every penny. You're going to spend about that much anyways to go there and eat dinner, but you're going to get to see Chuck Dunning. It's just going to be a really cool night to get out with your brothers and take it up a notch. It's not going to be an opportunity you want to miss. And those are limited. I know we're going to sell out of that.
Yes. Seating right now is limited to, I believe, 45. because we're just not going to have room for more than that in that room otherwise. Last year we had kind of the same policy, seating limited to 45. I think this year's seating is limited to 50. We just want to make sure that people, you know, that we don't have to suddenly change rooms or anything like that, because that room, that's what our max is. So it is limited, but that's going to be great, because last year we sold out, and I expect that this year we'll sell out as well, because we just had such a good time last year. This is going to be really great.
If I'm not mistaken, the last time we saw the numbers, we're getting up pretty close to our limit, right? I mean, we're about a quarter of the way there to the festive board sellout.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are way faster on track for festive board sales than I thought we would be by this point in time.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think I remember seeing it. It was like I was really shocked by how many festive board tickets had sold
right off
already.
the bat. Yeah.
Yeah. They were the hot commodity. And so if those brothers out there that want to go, or they're even the least bit interested, get those tickets now, because they are not going to last for much longer.
Yeah. And if you can't go, you can hawk them. You just stand on the street corner and sell them for $150.
Yeah. And so if you do sell your festive board ticket due to inability to attend, please keep in mind that we are trying to keep this to Texas Masonicon attendees only. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Let us know if that's actually something that comes up. Let us know. We'll help you with that. You know, because if you can't come, we're not here to rake you over the coals. We'll make it happen.
Yeah. But, you know, we already know guys that are, you know, they've told us they've made accommodations in town already and everything like that. You know, some people are getting Airbnbs, some people are getting hotel rooms, some people are staying with family. It's cool to hear the feedback, the positive feedback so fast.
Yeah. It's good stuff, man. Get your ticket. So, quote of the week this week, I've used this one before, but I just couldn't get past it because it fits so perfect what went on at Grand Launch this weekend. And it's by Oscar Wilde. Ultimately, the bond of all companionship, whether in marriage or in friendship, is conversation. And it's just so true. A good conversation, so beautiful.
Oh, yes.
And that lot went on this weekend. So if you want to get in contact with us, you hit us up on the website, footworth148.org, on Facebook at Fort Worth Lodge 148. Hit us up by email, footworth148@gmail.com. And, of course, check out Texas Masonicon at texasmasonicon.com. All right, gentlemen, this has been another good one. This is Rick Moore signing off.
This is Billy Hamilton signing off.
This is Gabriel Yagish signing off.
This is Evie Kirkendall signing off.
Adios.